there are biological differences between men and women that express themselves in temperament and in occupational choice. The theory was that as societies became more egalitarian, that men and women would become more the same. But that isn't what's happened. What's happened is the biggest differences between men and women now, temperamentally and in terms of their own interest, have manifested themselves in the Scandinavian countries. The biggest differences in the world in interest and temperament are between Scandinavian men and women. It's exactly the opposite of what everyone predicted. Men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it of their own accord. We've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1 female nurses to male, something like that. It might not be quite that extreme, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the purpose of the law. Those are ineradicable differences. You can eradicate them with tremendous social pressure and tyranny. But if you leave men and women to make their own choices, you will not get equal outcome. And so what that will mean is that men and women will make different choices in occupation if you let them have free choice. Now, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to stop that from happening? Is that the feminist perspective? Everyone's interests are better served if people have as equal access to opportunity to display their talents and to manifest their talents in the world as possible. The devil's in the details with regards to equality, because I'm an advocate of equality of opportunity. But
and
I think
outcomes.
the idea, outcomes, that's an appalling doctrine.
Why?
Why?
All right, simple question. Is gender equality a myth in your view? Is that something that's just never going to happen?
It depends on what you mean by equality. No,
Being
if
treated
you mean
fairly,
men and women,
getting the same opportunities? Why would there only be 7 women running FTSE 100 companies in the UK?
outcomes, that's an appalling doctrine.
Why?
Why?
All right. Well, hang on.
Because you have to produce an unbelievably potent bureaucracy to make the ever greater and ever finer distinctions that are necessary to enforce equality of outcome. How many group differences are you going to equalize across? Is it just gender and sex? How many genders?
No, so
gender and ethnicity? How many genders?
I think
how many
what
ethnicities?
people are...
How many races?
Why would there only be 7 women running FTSE 100 companies in the UK?
The first question might be, why would you want to do that?
Why would a man want to do it? I
Well,
mean, there's a lot of money, it's an interesting
job. There's a certain
you know?
number of men, although not that many, who are perfectly willing to sacrifice virtually all of their life to the pursuit of a high-end career. So they'll work. These are men that are very intelligent. They're usually very, very conscientious. They're very driven. They're very high energy. They're very healthy. And they're willing to work 70 or 80 hours a week, nonstop, specialized at one thing to get to the top. To get to the top of any organization is an incredibly competitive enterprise. And the men that you're competing with are simply not going to roll over and say, please take the position.
So let me come back to my
absolute
question.
all-out warfare.
But
Why
you're
would
saying
you have to battle for a high-quality position? If you're going to be successful, you need to be smart, conscientious, and tough.
Well, here's a radical idea. Why don't the bosses adopt the male bosses, shall we say, adopt some female traits so that women don't have to fight and get their sharp elbows out for the pay rises?
There was a huge debate in Canadian society at that point that was basically ran along the same lines as your argument, is that if the law firms didn't use these masculine criteria, then perhaps women would do better. But the market sets the damn game. It's like...
And the market is dominated by men.
No, it's not. It's not.
You,
the market is dominated by women. They make 80% of the consumer decisions. That's not the case at all.
Norway, where they've made a specific legislative effort, for example, with a quota of 40% of women on corporate boards or a quota for women to be in parliament.
Right.
they've specifically engaged in social engineering, and it seems to be working, and it seems to
Doesn't seem to be working
well,
particularly.
forgive me, but Norway is top of every contentment index that we see across the world.
Well, okay, so first of all, Norway has plenty of oil money, which is definitely contributing to that. And second, it depends on what you mean by working. There's no evidence, for example, that the legislation that was designed to increase the number of women on boards has produced any movement whatsoever in the number of women who hold managerial and administrative positions in Norway.
In Iceland, an energy company was about to go bankrupt. A new manager came in and said, OK, we've got to throw everything out and start again, and made a conscious decision based on his belief that it's a human right that men and women are paid equally. And so went out of his way to make the workforce within that company 50-50 as much as he could in terms of men and women being represented. So we're talking about engineers, we're talking about tradespeople, we're talking about in workshops, we're talking at the managerial level.
If you hire 50% women engineers and 50% male engineers, then the women engineers are less qualified because the pool of engineers is lower among women. So you can't hire 50% women engineers without producing a decrement in the quality of the engineers, because the selection pool is too small. You can't do that on a large scale. You might be able to do that in one company.
Yeah, and they certainly argue that it's not tokenism and they're not hiring second-rate women.
They might argue that, but if you did it on a large scale, that's what would happen. Because look, you think about it mathematically. If there's 10 times as many male engineers as there are female engineers, and you insist upon hiring 50-50, then obviously the degree to which the female engineers are proficient cannot be the same as the degree to which the male engineers are proficient. It's mathematically impossible.
So you're saying don't even try?
No. I'm saying something much more specific than that. Now, one company might be able to do that for a short period of time in one isolated location. But there, of course, if you have a new manager come in and he's doing all sorts of new things, there's 50 reasons why the company is going to fail or succeed. And you can say, well, it was because of the gender equity policies. It's like, yeah, well, it's a multivariate problem.
But they do point to the diversity now of the workforce, to improved morale, to improved strategies on how to come up with solutions, to their increased profitability.
None of that research is credible. There's no evidence whatsoever that diversity as measured by racial or gender representation has any bearing whatsoever on creativity, productivity, outcome, any of the things you're measuring. None of that research is credible in the least. It looks like real salaries are on the rise and general levels of poverty around the world are declining incredibly rapidly. Women are being educated at an unbelievably high rate compared to 30 years ago. Like, there's all sorts of reasons to be optimistic, but equity is not one of them. It's a bad idea, and we're going to pay for toying with it.
So you're saying we're hardwired as men and women to do certain things, to sort of run along tram lines, and there's nothing we can do about it?
No, I'm not saying there's nothing we can do about it, because it's like in a chess game, right? There's lots of things that you can do, although you can't break the rules of the chess game and continue to play chess. And your biological nature is somewhat like that, is it sets the rules of the game, but within those rules you have a lot of leeway.
Aren't you just whipping people up into a state of anger and
Not at all.
Divisions between men and women? You're stirring people up. Right, so you're saying that anyone who believes in equality, whether you call them feminists, call them whatever you want to call them, should basically give up because it ain't going to happen?
Only if they're aiming at equality of outcome.
So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine.
It's not only fine, it's eminently desirable for everyone, for individuals and for society.
But still women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really saying.
It depends on your measurement techniques. They're doing just fine in medicine. In fact, there are far more female physicians than there are male physicians. There are lots of disciplines that are absolutely dominated by women. Many, many disciplines. It's mathematically impossible.
So you're saying don't even try?
No, I'm saying something much more specific than that.
A lot of people listening to you will just say, I mean, are we going back to the dark
That's
ages
because they're actually
here?
not listening. They're
I'm
just
listening very
projecting
carefully,
what
and
they
I'm
think.
hearing you basically saying women need to just accept they're never going to make it on equal terms, equal outcomes is how you defined it.
No, I didn't
If
say
I was
that.
a young
I said
woman
that equal...
watching that, I would go, well, I might as well just go and play with my Cindy dolls and give
didn't
up
say
trying
that.
at school because I'm not going to get the top job I want.
You're going to have choices and equality of outcome. What if people choose different things, which is what they've been doing in Scandinavia? So the Scandinavian countries have moved more towards gender equality than any other countries, and the personality differences in Scandinavia have increased rather than decreased, and the proportion of women who are choosing STEM fields has decreased rather than increased. So as cultures become more gender neutral, the number of women who choose STEM fields decreases.
What do you mean
not
by
increasing.
STEM fields?
So science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
I
So
think
if you let
actually-
men and women make their choices, what actually happens is that they specialize in different situations, and you don't get equality of
Could they
outcome.
not have been programmed to have those views from the moment we raise them and give boys Lego and construction?
No,
girls?
because what happens is that as countries get more egalitarian, which means there's less programming of that sort, the differences get larger, not smaller. And the scientific data on that is clear, and most of it was generated by people who have a left-leaning bias, so you can't blame it on conservative scientists. It was a shock to everyone to find that out.
There's nowhere in the world that women are equal, but Scandinavia has made the most progress towards shared parenting, etc.
Yep.
That said, it's not done yet. There's nowhere in the world where this is done yet.
But it's having the opposite effect that the gender equality types predicted. Opposite, not the same.
No,
and it isn't a theory, it's actually data driven by tens of thousands of surveys and the best scientific literature on the topic. It's not a theory, and I didn't come about it because of my political perspective. I looked at the data. What it showed was that as countries become more egalitarian, the differences between men and women grow. They don't shrink.
Like Jordan, I look at the data and I look at the studies, and I'm really also very much interested in studies like the analysis that was done by the American Psychological Society, which looked at 45 analysis of whether there's sex difference over 20 years. And its conclusion was that men and women are basically alike in terms of personality, in terms of cognitive ability, in terms of leadership.
Aren't you just whipping people up into a state of anger and
Not at all.
Divisions between men and women?
يعني ايه انثى بقى؟ انا
تقولي
كلمة انثى دي ما
لما
بحبهاش.
تقولي
انا ضد الجواري، ضد شخصية الانوثة الجواري. انا انوثتي طبيعية.
Men and women actually are more the same than they are different. But the issue is that small differences at the population level can turn into very large differences at the extreme. So, for example, men and women are broadly similar with regards to aggression, although men tilt a little bit more towards aggression. So that if you picked a random person out of the population, male and female, and you guessed that the male was more aggressive, you'd be right 60% of the time. But if you take the 1 in 100 most aggressive people, they're all male. And that's why the overwhelming proportion of people who are in prisons are male. Now, do you want to equalize that, just out of curiosity? What about bricklayers? They're 99% male. And we've got about 3/4 of the population now in universities, in the humanities and social sciences, are female.
Yeah.
Are we going to equalize that? And men work longer hours. They work more dangerous jobs. They're more likely to move. They're more likely to work outside. They're more likely to participate in jobs in the STEM fields. And that's all hidden under the idea that the reason that men and women make different amounts of money is because of their gender. It's a very simplistic analysis, and trying to
Michael,
address
I was just going to say, Sophie, can you come back on that?
What I'm trying to equalise is opportunity and choice.
Fine, let's
And I-
equalize
You agree-
choice.
you agree-
Absolutely.
you agree on that.
But we won't get equal outcome that way.
And I think that what happens then, nobody knows, because we've never done it yet.
We do know.
But
We
I
know
think
what's happened in
it has-
Scandinavia.
But it's not
Scandinavia's
fully
not
got there yet.
finished
No, but
yet.
it's going in the opposite direction that everyone predicted, and
You know-
strongly.
There should be inequality of opportunity. There needs to be the same rights. But you know, something that surprised
outcome,
me,
quality of
that
outcome.
neither of you, and
Go on.
equality of outcome,
What do we think about equality? Will it ever happen, Salim?
I was going to say I thought it was going to happen, but after listening to Jordan, he's swayed my opinion.
Why did you think it was going to happen?
Because I think we're going to become more cognitive creatures, and jobs are going to be more about mental skills.
Technology.
But then I've been visited schools, and I work in STEM. I'm a software developer, and the number of women doing software development hasn't increased. I would have thought they would have increased more, but I went into secondary school to do GCSE IT stuff, and there's very, very few girls doing IT, and I was thinking IT is the future, and the schools are pushing for more girls to go into IT.
I'm a CEO of a quite profitable IT company. I have the experience and authority to talk about this topic. Now, what I want to say is that the whole talk about women in IT is usually a bad thing for us. Because basically what it says is, well, it's okay to have lower income, it's okay to do worse than boys in the IT industry because, well, there's a world conspiracy against you, you know, people hate you, that's why. So that's why I'm against the whole talk. Also, I did some recruiting because I have a company. And also I went to a school that had like 8 girls and 100 boys. So, you know, I'm quite used to being around a lot of boys. The whole thing is, girls are usually quite lazy. They're just not that good programmers. Sorry, but that's true, honestly. They just don't want to get their hands dirty to do the job. And when I tried to do some recruiting, I intentionally wanted to recruit women. And at the end, I failed to do so. Do you want to know why? Because most of those girls were usually just cheating, and they were just not good programmers. At the end, I had to recruit boys. And that's why I think the whole talk about let's recruit more women is bad, because at the end, you're recruiting worse programmers. At the end, your company is going to suffer. You're going to lose some money. I know it's trendy to talk about women in IT, but I think women should just start studying more and getting the job done. And I honestly don't see girls staying up until late at their office and working that often. No, it's usually the boys staying there. Why? I don't know. So that's what I want to say. I think the whole lecture should be removed.
NASA's face of space has changed for good.
The world's first all-female spacewalk.
This girl power moment we were looking forward to, the first all-female spacewalk.
Making history this morning.
We're able to make history.
Everyone is watching these two women step into space and step into space history.
Just made history.
One giant leap for 2 NASA astronauts, the first all-female spacewalk.
Tonight, one giant leap for women in space, venturing outside the International Space Station and into history. Back on Earth, the girls in this classroom were watching in awe.
It's really cool seeing someone with the same gender as me being out there in space and like doing something so great.
So great is right.
Cook, 40, has made 3 prior spacewalks. Mir just became the 15th woman to walk in space.
Many women around the age of, I would say, between 28 and 32 have a career family crisis that they have to deal with. And I think that's partly because of the foreshortened time frame that women have to contend with. Like, women have to get the major pieces of their life put together faster than men. For the typical woman, she has to have her career and family in order pretty much by the time she's 35, because otherwise the options start to run out. And so that puts a tremendous amount of stress on women, especially at the end of their 20s. At 19, it's all career. By 30, that's just not the case. I don't know if I've seen a single woman who I didn't think had a psychological problem who hadn't seriously flipped in their attitude towards the balance of family and career by the time they were 30. And then you see lots of women who at 40 haven't had kids and perhaps wanted to, and that's not a pleasant situation. I was talking to a woman who is about 39, a professional woman, attractive, well put together, competent, well educated, successful in her profession, unmarried, in a relationship with an older guy, but unmarried, and desperate to have a child. She said no one ever talked to her about the fact that she'd actually want to have a family or encouraged her to think about doing that. It was as if it wasn't within the realm of possibility that one of the things that she might have the ambition to do would be to be a mother. And that's just not acceptable. And it was like she woke up in her late 30s and thought, well, the first thing she thought was, this profession of mine is actually nowhere near as comprehensively fulfilling as the advertisements claimed, which is something that virtually everyone discovers as they move forward in their professional career. You know, I mean, the reason that you get paid generally for your work is because you're doing something that you wouldn't choose to do if you weren't being paid for it. And so the idea that your career is going to be the fundamental source of your fulfillment is true for a very tiny minority of people. And even with them, it's complicated. So she was tearful and upset about the fact that it took her so long to discover that there were other important dimensions to life. And so our society needs to rethink our relative valuation of career versus motherhood. So we don't know how to solve this problem, but we could at least have an intelligent discussion about it, and we could start by admitting that the idea that most 19-year-old women are fed, which is that their career will be the primary purpose of their life, is actually a lie.
Do you think women's liberation is a good thing?
I'm very sceptical about some of the extremes it's carried to. I think women are in great danger of being dominated by women, being told to liberate themselves by doing what other women want them to do. That to me is a great danger.